Hi, it's me, Pat Stewart, with Goats 101, class number 5. This one is all about shorthand, really, confirmation and jargon that you'll need to understand in order to look at goats and understand what people are talking about. I talked a little bit last week about how to read a pedigree and what all that means. This time I want to talk more about the actual parts of the goat and the way we judge them, and also about the production awards, and how when you're talking to breeders, you might actually have them make remarks like superior genetics or Juju awards and things like that you go, what the heck are those things? If I'm a little tongue-tied, it's because I just tried to do this and I turned off my camera in the middle of the process. So this is take 2, all right? I actually don't have the pictures right in front of me, so I'm going to put them up on behind me when I do the editing for this episode, so you can actually see the parts of the goat that I'm talking about. The head is pretty obvious, but when we get to the poll, when I do the editing for this episode, so you can actually see the parts of the goat that I'm talking about. The head is pretty obvious, but when we get to the poll, it's the very top of the head, and the poll sometimes will have a spot. You'll have a white spot. White poll spots are dominant in Nigerians, so if one of the parents has it and they still have fur on the top of their head, then all the babies will have it. You will sometimes see goats with bald heads, especially bucks with bald polls. That's because they've been fighting too much and they've knocked all their fur off. So as we're going down the head and we get to the neck, the back of that tunnel from the head to the chest, or the head to the body, is called the neck. Underneath that is called the throat. All right? So when we talk about the throat, we're talking about the area underneath where the goat swallows. Okay, you come down from the neck to the withers. The withers are where the head meets the back, and we ideally want to see that be slightly higher than the rump, but we don't want to see a doe that stands, or a buck that stands like this. Okay? There's a tendency right now to have our animals look as uphill as possible. And sometimes that's achieved by having animals literally just stand on a rock or stand on the side of a hill. And sometimes that's achieved because somebody's scrunched down on their rear end and pushed their bottom legs down. We want to see, at least I, and most judges, want to see a definite difference between the height of the withers and the height of the rump, but not like a ski slope. All right? They want to see air movement, front and back. That's why we do all of this. But if the animal is walking too much uphill, then that's going to be an awful lot of wear and tear in the hips. So we want to see a little uphill stance, not a whole lot. We definitely don't want to see a downhill stance. Okay? Because that's, if we look at delivering babies, that's gravity does not help if it has to push uphill. So a little bit of a slope is what we want to help with baby delivery and air movement. Okay? Then behind the withers is an area called the chine. And the chine is right over the shoulder assembly. And it should be a nice tight joint there. If a goat puts their head down to eat, and you see a little bit of a hill in that mountain on either side of their backbone, that's a sign that they're not as tight as you'd like to see. But it's not bad if when they stand up you can't see that. If you have an animal that stands up and you can still see those 3 little hills, then you're definitely looking at an animal who's loose in the shoulder assembly, and that's not something I would choose to buy, because over time arthritis is going to set in there. All right, so then we go from the chine to the loin, which is the area of the bottom rib cage area, down to the rump, which you can see the rump will come along and there'll be a point up and then it goes down again. That area between the chine and where the rump, the top of the rump is, it's called the loin. And we want to ideally see a good strong line there, not dippy in the chine and then up. Because again, think about long-term health. Where you got that dip in the chine or dip in the loin, those are all places where arthritis is going to set in and be difficult. Then we get to the rump. And the Nigerian has had a real struggle with trying to get the rumps the way we want them to be. And the first ones, the rumps were very steep and short. So the point of the rump was here, the height of the rump was here, and then the tail is down here. And if it's too abrupt, then it can be difficult for delivery. It also is just not as appealing looking. So we want to see a slight, some judges want to see flat like a pancake. I don't like that. I think that stops gravity from helping. I'd like to see a little bit of a long, gentle slope. Okay? And then on either side of the backbone, about halfway down the length of the back hips of the doe, you will see an area called the thurl. And you can see it on the diagram that I'll put up. When we talk about a doe being flat, there's two different ways she can be flat. She can either be flat thurl to thurl, which means that her dorsal bone is flat. She does not have a long rise. My goats often have a decided rise in the tail head. But flat to thurl means across the way they're pretty flat. Then we have flat from hips to pins. A flat from hips to pins is, this is the point of the hip, the point of the rump, excuse me. Then we've got the tail head here. Below the tail head, you'll see an area called the pin bone. It's the last bone on the goat's body. Okay, go past that pin bone and there's nothing there. We want to see a nice gentle slope from the height of the rump to the pin. Okay? So an animal that's got a steep sloping rump is like that. A doe who's flat from hip to pins is like that. A doe who is flat from hip to pins and thurl to thurl is like that. Like somebody set a table on her back. Okay? When we talk about angulation in a goat, you will see some goats that walk and stand like they don't have any curve in their back. The leg is just one solid stick. We call that posty-legged, obviously. Ideally, we want to see an animal who comes in and curls around. The leg is gentle and curves in towards what we call the incurving thigh, and then out to the hocks. Okay? And ideal conformation on a doe or any goat is you could drop a plumb line, a straight line from the pin bones to the hocks to the dew claw. If you can drop that pin bone when they're standing up, and that pin bone is the area from the hocks to the pastern or the dew claw is perpendicular to the ground. Ideal conformation is that's also right below the hip bone. So when we talk about dairy qualities in a goat, we're talking about that incurving thigh. We're talking about a long bone pattern, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. We're talking about dairy skin that if you pull it off, can easily pull it off from the body of the goat. Not yank it, but just give it a little tug. It should be thin and stretchy. Those are all dairy qualities. Okay? So if we're looking at the conformation of the goat, again, working from the front to the back, from the under the belly, we get to the throat and then to the brisket. The brisket should be nice and wide. Should be lots of room for air movement and lung capacity. And then you go down to the chest floor where the brisket actually morphs and eases its way into the belly. Again, that should be flat and it should be wide so that you can get more air exchange in there. Then we go underneath the belly to the udder. And at the front of the udder, in a really productive doe, there'll be a bulge. And some people think it's a hernia. It's not. It's the milk vein. And that vein has not got milk in it. It's actually got a really strong blood supply to a very productive udder. Okay. Then we have the udder with her two teats. And she should have two teats. If she has more than two teats, some people tell you to get rid of her. I will tell you, I would remove the extra teat, or I would just sell it as a pet and not even register it. Actually, I would register it, but it's up to you. So then we go through the udder. The udder should actually have a fore-udder extension, then an area that's hidden by the back leg, and then the rear udder extension. So it's like a balloon that's hung underneath there. And if you were to look at it from the back end, from the escutcheon, it should be round and then tucked up like an upside-down heart. And that upside-down heart is formed by the medial suspensory ligament. A problem the Rita's had, and we've been working on for a long time, is that MDL, the MSL, medial suspensory ligament, was not strong. And so as the udder got more productive, if there wasn't enough floor to hold it up, the udder would just collapse. And the teats would point out sideways, and nobody was healthy. And it was difficult to milk them, and it was difficult for the babysitters, and it was a mess. So we've been working on that for years, and it's getting much better. You don't want to have a suspensory ligament that's so strong that it cuts the udder in half. That's called a cleaved udder, and that's not what we want. But you do need to have some suspension. Each gallon is going to weigh a little over 8 pounds of milk, 8 pounds, so that's a lot. That's an 8-pound bowling ball hanging underneath this dough all the time. So she needs to have the right conformation to hold it all together. So we've talked about hips and pins, and we've talked about thurl to thurl. You also will hear people talk about loosen the crop. That's where the shoulder assembly comes from the withers down, and you want to see that shoulder be tight against the body, but sometimes they'll kind of look like wings coming out to the side. I wouldn't throw the doe out, but I would look to breed her to a buck who has got stronger front end assembly. Okay, so that's it for a basic conformation. When you go into the show ring, the judge is going to ask you to know those parts of the goat, because he wants to know how much you understand and how much you care. And he doesn't want to do the long explanation of, you know, that area underneath the chin that goes down towards the brisket, what's that area called? He doesn't want to do that. He wants to say, where's the throat? All right. So then as you're looking at purchasing animals, you also have to look at some of the other designations. You'll often hear about herd milk test. And what is milk test? Milk test is a monthly test that's done, or an annual test that's done, and sent to the Dairy Herd Improvement Association. And you can do an owner sampler where you take the sample of your milk on your own. You take one sample in the morning, fill a vial that they'll send to you, halfway full, and then do another one 12 hours later when you do your next milking. You take another sample and fill that vial up to the top line where it's designated on the vials. You put the name of the goat, the number of the goat, because there'll be a number on your herd sheet. And then that is sent off with all of the other samples from your herd to the DRPC, the Dairy Records Processing Center. The DRPC will test that for somatic cell count to see how healthy your animals are. They will look at coliform counts. They will look at milk protein. They will look at butterfat, and they will look at how much fluid milk did your goat produce over that 12 hours. And then based upon how many days she's been in milk, because you will have told them that, they will be able to project how much milk she will give in that lactation and how much you could expect to see her give 2 or 3 years out. So milk test is a really handy thing to have. You can do a one-day milk test. And that's where simply you have somebody, either you bring your goat to the tester or a tester comes to you and you do a snapshot. You do a 12-hour test once in the morning, again in the afternoon. The samples are sent off to the DRPC the same way. They cannot project lifetime production. But they can project whether or not she will make her star reach her qualification level for that year. And that 1-day star will just be a star D for American Goat Society. It's just a simple star for ADGA. There's no star S or star M after it. It's just a star. If you do a 1-day test, your animal will be ranked with other 1-day test animals. It will not be eligible for top 10 superior genetics, elite doe, or anything like that. But it is nice to have to know exactly what is the quality of the milk that you're producing. Then there's the owner sampler, and then there's the standard test. The standard test is 305 days long. You can do it in a circle test where you have several other goat owners around you and you take turns testing each other's animals. You cannot test the same herd twice in a row, and you cannot do a reciprocal test. You have to have a third party in your circle. And what happens is each person gets to be a certified tester. They do the same thing as if you were going to do a 1-day test, only they record and they come back every month. A different tester comes back every month, and that information is sent to the DRPC, and that record becomes permanent part of your goat's record. If she reaches her qualification star, that becomes part of her permanent name. If she reaches her qualification level based upon her age, and her father has 3 other daughters, or 2 daughters and a son who had 3 daughters, then their record can affect the parentage. So if you've got a doe who was never on test, but she had, I believe it's 3 daughters, it may be more, but I believe it's 3 daughters who went on test and got their star, then she would get her star because on progeny, her offspring did it. But if mama had her star and the babies get their star when they come into milk, they become second generation milkers. So 2 star M's or 2 star D's. The next generation would be 3 star M's. And there are herds out there in full-size goats that are 18 generation milkers. So that's a lot of dedication. So you can do a circle test, or you can do a standard test where you actually pay somebody to come do the same things. An individual is paid to come to your farm, and they check tattoos to make sure you're not misrepresenting your animals. They take the records, and then their signature is a contract that they adequately represent what you've produced that day, what your goats produced that year. And if your animals are in the top 10 of the milkers in your breed for American Dairy Goat Association or AGS, American Goat Society, then they become top 10 milkers. And there's a little bit of money that goes with that. If they are members of the American Nigerian Dwarf Association, ANDA, then they may be qualified for a Juju Award. Those are various levels depending on how much milk they make. Superior genetics is based upon how much milk they make and linear appraisal and show records. They can qualify on both or either. And then there is something called an elite doe. An elite doe is based upon how much money that doe would make if the milk were being sold. That is not something that comes out of the registry. It comes out of the DRPCs. So the top 5% of does in a breed will be the elite class for that year. The top 15% of bucks whose daughters are in the top percentages, they will qualify as superior genetics. So it does matter that you keep the lines going. Keeping goats is really not just about managing them for now. If you're actually in this to make a difference in the breed, your choices are made based upon how you're going to contribute to the herd pool in general. Okay? So with all that in mind, the fact that we all share in the destiny of each other and in the building of our breeds, it's important that we all have the same vernacular and that we all understand what we're talking about. So that's why nomenclature matters. So next week, we're going to be talking more about housing and what these goats actually need to live. It's not the Taj Mahal like you may think it is. But this is the last of the classes that specifically just talk about paperwork. Okay? So, just a newsflash, our first babies were born last night for the year. So, I am now going to have to drop out sometimes to just go deliver babies. But I will talk to you on Thursday night at 8 o'clock for the Zoom chat. And then next Tuesday, I'll have another class out for you. So take care and stay well. Thanks. Bye.